Graham Coffey, Dawgs Central, joins us. 365 Sports. The AP preseason poll is out. The coaches poll is out. And no surprise where Georgia is ranked. The expectations are huge. They're massive. There's a reason for that. Back-to-back national titles. And last year then, the last, just a heartbreaking loss in the SEC championship to Alabama. Graham, they're number one. There's no surprise there. Would it have been shocking had they not been, in your opinion?
I don't think it would have been shocking. I think you can make an argument that Ohio State, deserves to have consideration for that spot. I think I saw a publication, put 7 Ohio State players in the first and second team All-American list. So, yeah, I think Georgia might have a little more depth than anybody else and a little more proven depth. But you could hear an argument for the upside of some of these other contenders.
Graham, if I think I ranked, like in my personal top 25, I ranked them number 2 just because I think Ohio State's got more questions answered on offense than Georgia does at this point, but I might be splitting hairs. But one of those questions is, okay, Ra Thomas gone. They've got to replace Ladd McConkey and Brock Bowers, and they did well without them when those guys were injured last year. But who are the guys that are going to take them back to that level of being number 1 in the country at those particular positions?
Yeah, I think that for Georgia, there is no replacing a Brock Bowers, right? Like you get Oscar Delp back, who was another, 5-star type of tight end recruit and played a lot last year, played well when Bowers was out. He's going to catch the football when you throw it to him, and he'll work underneath and do things that normal tight ends do. You're not going to have a guy who you flip the ball out to in the flat that weighs 230 pounds and plays tight end and also, goes and gets 10 yards after the catch every time he touches the football. That's just not going to be part of the offense this year, in my opinion. You look at the receiver position, they brought in Colby Young from Miami, and, I think that add was extremely important now with Thomas gone from the team, because Young is another true X-receiver body type. He's 6'4", 220. He runs a 4.5. He does all those good things, and was dominant at times for them this spring and has been very good through fall camp. So I think that's a name to watch for them. You've got Dominic Lovett back, who was the leading receiver, for Missouri back in 2022, came to Georgia last year, led the team in receptions. I think he'll be more of a first and second option this year when he was kind of a second, third option with Bowers and McConkey on the field. But, yeah, the behind him, like, there's guys like Dylan Bell who have had nice games before where they've gone out and scored a couple touchdowns. There's well-recruited players. There's speedy guys like Anthony Evans. But you haven't seen them really do it on a consistent basis before. So I think your analysis there is certainly a fair question to ask about Georgia in terms of who's going to step up and how quickly will they do that with that road game at Alabama lingering at the end of September.
Graham, let me ask you this. What is the one position that could be, if there is a weakness with Georgia, what is it?
I think the question for me is still the interior of that defensive line. Mm-hmm. I think they've got the edge rushers. The back seven is going to be really, really talented again. There will be NFL players all over in that regard, but they struggled at defensive tackle last year. You saw in that Alabama game, they really struggled to get pressure with 4, and there were some times, especially late, where Alabama was kind of able to lean on them and run the ball up the middle between the tackles. They bring back Nazir Stackhouse, who was really good next to Jalen Carter in 2022, but kind of took a step back in 23. And there's a lot of well-recruited talent. It's Georgia, right? Like there's 5 stars and all of those good things, but none of those guys really proved themselves to be a 4-down player or a 3-down player last year, I should say. And they didn't really have a true kind of nose tackle presence. They've got a couple freshmen who are now becoming sophomores that have that kind of 330, 350-pound body to maybe plug the middle. But, again, we haven't seen them do it before. I think they need someone in the interior that can get some push and force some double teams at times to sort of open up pass rush lanes and two-gap run stopping for everyone else on that defensive line.
Graham, from a Georgia and also just Graham Coffey, the Georgia college football fan media guy perspective, of these 4, what do you think is the biggest deal for the Dogs? The expanded playoff, no divisions, no Nick Saban, or the addition of Oklahoma and Texas to the SEC?
It's got to be no Nick Saban, right? I mean, you look across the rest of the conference, there's not anyone else in the SEC who is at their current job that has beaten Kirby Smart at the school they're at right now. Hugh Freeze did it at Ole Miss back in 2016, but he's at Auburn now. So that's it. I mean, they haven't lost a game to somebody not named Alabama in almost 4 years, since November of 2020 to Florida and Dan Mullen in Jacksonville during the COVID season. So I think Georgia and Alabama, those staffs knew each other so well that there were times that I think they kind of, almost overcoached things and maybe over schemed things and tried to change something that was working all year long. You saw that in 2021 in the SEC title. You saw that with some of the defensive packages last year in the SEC title. I think Nick Saban being gone is just a big sort of psychological hurdle in a lot of ways for Georgia.
Now, who has higher expectations in your opinion this year, Georgia, Ohio State, or Texas?
I think it's Ohio State. I think when you spend the amount of money that they spent in the transfer portal to create the roster that they've created, that you have to cash that in. Sarkisian has brought a sense of order to Texas, in my opinion, that hasn't really been there since before the kind of end of the Mac Brown era, and everyone seems aligned behind him. So I think that they're kind of here to make this push in the SEC, and he'll get a year or two more after this, even if this doesn't go the way they hope, to kind of figure it out and adjust and keep recruiting to what they need in this conference. But with Ryan Day, it's like he's been close, and you can only sign top 3 classes for so long before you start to get a label of this guy. It's not a talent problem, it's a coaching problem, and I think this is the year for Ohio State to, like, if they don't make the national title game, then I think that it's a failure for them, truthfully. I could see them losing to Georgia and that being okay, maybe in the final game or something like that. But you can't continue to get people to invest the amount that Ohio State fans invest, both financially and emotionally, to come up short. You got to start winning championships, and it's been 10 years since they've won one.
Graham, in the SEC, who is the scariest, outside of Texas, obviously, because they were in the playoff last year, outside of Texas, who's the scariest threat to Georgia at the top?
I still think it's Alabama. I really do. I think what the possibilities are with Jalen Milroe and Kalen DeBoer's offense, with what we saw DeBoer do with the vertical pass game at Washington, and we know that's what Milroe is best at, is throwing the ball downfield. Like, there's a lot that could be unlocked there. And if he can sort of get Milroe in a spot where he's making quicker decisions on some shorter throws, then yeah, like that could unlock a whole lot. There's still 5 stars on the defensive line. There's, I have questions about their secondary. They basically returned 0 kind of returning production that was at Alabama last year, but maybe they go out and start winning some shootouts in kind of a DeBoer fashion that you saw at Washington, and that shifts things. But until Georgia beats Alabama, especially beats them in Tuscaloosa, I think you got to continue to sort of look at that as the biggest hurdle, because Texas isn't on the schedule right now.
Graham, I know with the expanded playoff, there's going to be the 4 byes, and more often than not, you think that Georgia would probably be in that category. And hard to imagine a scenario where them not making the playoff now for the foreseeable future would not be some disaster. But how cool do you think a game in Athens, a first-round playoff type game, how cool would that be?
It's hard to think of anything that would be much cooler, to be honest. Especially, you get a classic opponent like a USC or a Michigan or somebody like that coming to town. I think that place would be rocking. I think it would be a really, really special thing, and to do that in December with just sort of the football weather and all of that, it's something that I think we'll see probably, sometime in the next few years, and I hope we'll see. And in some ways, I do wonder if, like, maybe being, a third-place SEC team that doesn't have to go to Atlanta and beat yourself up against the first or second-place team, and then you get to just maybe host a home game as like an 8 seed or a 7 seed or something, and kind of slip into that picture. Like, that might not be a bad way to live for some of these teams. And it would certainly be good for the town and the school and for ticket sales to host one.
It's Graham Coffey, Dawgs Central, with us on 365 Sports. Georgia ranked number 1 in both of the preseason polls, and, of course, a reason why and how good they've been. So there've been the outfield stuff. There's been the distractions and the driving infractions and all that, et cetera. How much of that is an everyday deal, or is it something that they are nipping in the bud and moving forward?
Well, I think it's hard to say they're nipping it in the bud when, it's been an ongoing issue since the tragic accident that happened in January of 2023, right? I think Athens is a different type of college town than a lot of places. And, I was in school there a long time ago now, but I was in school there. And, Athens police are certainly a little more present than some college town police. And, they certainly are around and posted up. And there are things that Georgia players have been arrested for, like turning the wrong way down a one-way street while, not being intoxicated and just being confused on a dark street downtown. That, like, I'm just going to be honest with you guys, that doesn't really move me. It doesn't bother me. It's an honest mistake that an 18-year-old made behind the wheel. There are other things like street racing charges that I look at and I say, if you're a member of the Georgia football program and you had, other members of that program that lost their lives in a racing accident, then, like, there's no excuse for you to go out there and do that stuff. I remember being 20 years old. I remember things happening to other people that were 20 years old and not believing those things could happen to me. So I have compassion for just the nature of youth and all of that. But at this point, I do think Georgia's got to find a better way to motivate these guys into not doing this, because it continues to happen. And if it's going to continue to happen, then clearly, something is not getting through. I think Ra Thomas being dismissed from the program was a good thing. I think that was the right thing to do. I should say it wasn't a good thing because I hate it for the future of the kid and all of that. But it was the right decision by Kirby Smart. It's just kind of a question of, the next guy that gets arrested for a vehicle-related incident that involves a high rate of speed, like, are we going to start talking about missing a game? It's like, what's it going to take before the message gets through to everybody else that says, hey, I don't want to do that anymore.
Tell us something about Carson Beck that maybe those who don't or aren't around the Georgia program don't know about.
Yeah, I think Carson Beck is, he kind of gets this reputation as sort of a cool customer. He's kind of a quiet guy, and he's got the tattoos, and he's just sort of a little bit laid back and all that. But I think there's an intensity to him that a lot of people don't realize is there. I think you look at him last year, he really kind of came into his own as a quarterback for Georgia in his first road start with Georgia behind on the road in a really, really crazy environment at Jordan-Hare Stadium playing Auburn. So he's a guy that seems to meet the moment, and he has that composure that I think helps him in those moments. But he's, I believe, really kind of matured from a leadership standpoint this offseason. He's been more of an organizer than a doer, I guess you would say. And I think for him, people probably underappreciate a little bit just how good he was last year in terms of getting the ball out. Like his mental processing from a football standpoint is as impressive as any Georgia quarterback that I've covered. He sees things just incredibly quick, and he sees the field very quick, and that obviously is a huge help to the offensive line, and it avoids sacks and all those things. And I think that in some ways not having Bowers and McConkey that kind of become just sort of the focus, on almost every pass play, it may unlock him onto a sort of a new level of some sort. I just think that, not getting kind of honed in on this is the guy where the ball needs to go on 3rd and 7 when it's a big play. Like, he may see things that he wasn't seeing before. He may get to reads that he wasn't getting to before, and it might create more big plays for Georgia.
Graham, thank you very much for your coverage and also your time when you're joining us whenever you can. Graham Coffey, Dawgs Central, again covering Georgia for and also being a part of the segment with us on 365 Sports. We appreciate that.